Welcome to our deep dive all about narrative discourse analysis.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be looking at how people use stories to create meaning and understanding.
It's a really fascinating field.
Yeah, and today we're hoping to give you a bit of a shortcut to get into this whole complex world of narrative discourse analysis.
Exactly. And we're going to pack it with real-world examples.
Oh, yeah, and insights that I think are really going to make you see stories in a whole new way.
I think so, too.
So we're talking about going beyond the surface level, right? Not just once upon a time kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what is the big deal about understanding these sort of like hidden messages that are in these stories?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, narratives are everywhere, right?
Yeah, they are everywhere.
For everyday conversations, news, social media,
Yeah.
even in how we think about ourselves and the world.
Yeah.
So really, this is about being able to decode the hidden messages in those stories that we encounter every day.
So by understanding this, we can become more critical consumers of information.
Absolutely.
And it's not just like big dramatic stories that we're talking about here.
Not at all.
It's these smaller everyday stories that we tell.
Like when you think about like a politician trying to connect with voters,
Yeah.
they're going to position themselves in a certain light.
Right.
Maybe the hero and their opponent, maybe the villain.
Yeah.
And then think about like brands that use storytelling in their marketing to kind of evoke emotion and build loyalty with the customer.
So can you give us an example then of what you mean by these smaller stories?
Well, think about even just a small anecdote that you share with a friend, maybe about your busy weekend, or something funny that happened on your commute.
Yeah.
Or even a complaint about a long line at the coffee shop.
Oh, yeah. I do that all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what's the significance of that?
Well, a researcher in the field, Michael Bamberg, calls these small stories. And he argues that these are actually where we do a lot of identity work.
Identity work. What do you mean by that?
It's how we use these seemingly casual stories to present ourselves to the world.
Oh, okay.
To kind of signal who we are, what we value, how we want to be perceived.
So, for example, if I'm telling you about my super busy weekend, I might be trying to show you that I'm productive.
Exactly.
Or that I'm popular.
Yeah, you got it.
I have a busy social life.
And it's a way of us constructing our identity through storytelling. And the same goes for the listener. They're also interpreting your small story, forming their own impression of you based on the narrative you choose to share.
So there's a lot more going on beneath the surface of these conversations.
Oh, absolutely.
Than we maybe realize.
For sure.
And it goes beyond just the individual identity as well.
Yeah, it helps shape group dynamics too.
Okay.
And reinforce social norms.
Wow. So I'm looking at all my conversations in a whole new way now.
I know, it's really interesting once you start looking at it in this way.
And I guess a way to start looking at this is to understand the building blocks of these stories.
Exactly. And a great way to do that is through the work of William Labov.
Oh, yeah.
He developed a model for understanding the structure of narratives.
Yeah. I remember learning about Labov's model, but can you give us a little refresher about how it works?
So he breaks it down into 6 parts.
Okay.
Abstract orientation, complicating action evaluation, resolution, and Coda.
Okay.
I think a good way to illustrate this is with an anecdote.
Okay.
About how I first encountered his work.
I would love to hear this.
So I was at an academic conference.
Okay.
Feeling a little overwhelmed, to be honest.
Okay.
By all the jargon and, highbrow discussions.
Yeah.
So I was getting coffee when I bumped into...
Okay, hold on. Before you go any further.
Sure.
Could we just break down those 6 parts?
Yeah, of course.
So that we can follow along with your story a little bit better.
Okay, you got it.
Yeah.
So abstract is like a quick summary that sets the stage, like a headline.
Okay.
In my case, it would be something like, a chance encounter at a conference changed my perspective on narrative analysis.
Okay, great. So that sets it up.
Right.
And then what's the orientation?
Orientation is setting the scene.
Okay.
So, bustling conference hall.
Okay.
Scent of coffee. Murmur of conversations.
Yeah, I can imagine it.
Exactly.
So we're there.
And then complicating action.
Okay.
Is the part where something happens that disrupts the norm.
So in your case, that would be bumping into someone.
Exactly.
At the coffee break.
And it wasn't just anyone. It was Michael Bamberg himself.
Oh, wow.
The small stories guy.
That's amazing.
I was totally starstruck.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, so abstract orientation, complicating action, and then you have evaluation.
Okay, what is that?
Evaluation is where we kind of go beyond just recounting events.
Okay.
And start reflecting on their significance.
Okay.
So for me, it would be like how I felt meeting Bamberg. The nerves, the excitement, maybe the shift in my thinking as we discussed his work.
So it adds a layer of depth and meaning to the story.
Exactly. It's highlighting why that encounter mattered.
Okay.
How it shapes my understanding of narrative analysis.
Well, what's the resolution then?
The resolution brings closure to the narrative.
Okay.
So after we chatted, I felt really energized,
Okay.
Like I had been given this new lens to view the world.
Oh, wow.
I started paying more attention to the small stories that everyone was telling.
Yeah.
Including my own.
So it's kind of a turning point for you.
Absolutely.
In the field.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then lastly, you have the Coda.
Okay, what is that?
Which is kind of like the concluding statement.
Okay.
That ties it all back to the present moment.
So in your case, that would be you sitting here today.
Thanks.
Telling me this story.
It's about showing how that encounter shaped my journey.
Shaped your journey.
And brought me to where I am today.
It's amazing how you've just woven in those 6 elements into your own anecdote. It makes Labov's model so understandable.
Well, it's a framework that you can apply to any story.
Right.
From a simple anecdote to a complex novel.
It makes you wonder what other fascinating insights are just kind of hidden within the stories we tell and hear every day.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, what's next?
Well, we can take a closer look at the power of those small stories.
Okay.
How they really reveal a lot about our identities and how we navigate the world.
I'm ready.
Okay, great.
Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So we're back and ready to talk about family narratives.
Oh, yeah.
I'm already thinking about some of the classic stories in my family,
Right.
The ones that come out at every holiday, get together.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, but what's going on beneath the surface of these, seemingly lighthearted family stories?
Well, researchers, Elinor Ochs and Lisa Capps, have done some really fascinating work in this area.
Okay.
And they found that family narratives are what's called co-constructed.
Co-constructed.
Meaning they're shaped by everyone involved.
Okay.
It's not just one person telling the story.
Right.
It's a collaborative process.
So like a group storytelling project where everyone's kind of adding their own perspective.
Right. And as these stories are retold over time, they often evolve.
Oh, interesting.
Like details might get embellished.
Yeah.
The emphasis might shift a little bit.
Right.
And the meaning of the story can even change to reflect maybe the evolving dynamics within the family.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about how the story of my uncle accidentally setting the Thanksgiving turkey on fire. That's definitely gotten more dramatic over the years.
Oh, I bet.
Now it involves fireworks and a runaway dog.
I love it.
It's crazy.
That's a perfect example of how those family narratives can be fluid.
Yeah.
Really dynamic.
Yeah.
And adapt to the needs of the family at different points in time.
So they're always changing. What does that tell us about their role in shaping family identity?
Well, Ochs and Capps argue that these narratives are really central to how families create a shared sense of who they are.
Okay.
They help families define their history, their values, and what they believe in.
I can see that those stories we tell about our ancestors or our triumphs and even our failures.
Right.
It's like weaving this shared narrative that connects us as a family.
It's like a tapestry.
Yeah.
Woven from all these individual threads of stories.
But it's not just about shared memories.
No.
Right? These narratives can also help families cope.
Yeah.
With difficult situations.
Exactly.
How so?
Well, think about stories that emphasize resilience in the face of adversity.
Okay.
Or those that highlight the importance of family unity.
Okay, yeah.
With families face challenges, these narratives can really offer comfort and strength.
Yeah.
And a sense of continuity.
It's like drawing strength from that shared history.
Exactly.
Those values that are embedded in those stories.
And it's not just about the content of the stories either.
Okay.
It's about how they're told.
Right.
Who gets to tell them
right.
how those tellings shape the narrative.
So there's a power dynamic at play, even within families.
Absolutely.
When it comes to storytelling.
The person who tells the story often has the power to influence how it's perceived and remembered.
Okay.
Think about the family historian.
Right.
The one who always recounts the family's origin story at gatherings.
Yeah.
They have a really significant role in shaping how that family understands its past.
Wow. It makes you think about whose voices are amplified
yes.
and whose are maybe minimized or left out
right.
of those narratives.
It's really interesting.
It's fascinating how something as seemingly simple as a family story can actually reveal so much about the dynamics within a family, their values, their struggles, even like their unspoken rules.
It really is, and what we learn about family narratives can even be applied to other contexts as well.
Okay.
Like workplaces or social groups, even entire nations. You know, the stories we tell ourselves as a society can really shape our collective identity and our understanding of history.
That's amazing. I want to ask you about those unexpected places.
Yeah.
Where narrative analysis comes into play, like the medical setting.
Oh, yeah. That's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
You know, for a long time, medicine focused primarily on the biological aspects of illness.
Okay.
But more recently, there's been this growing recognition that a patient's personal narrative, their story of their illness, is just as important.
So it's not just about the symptoms
No.
and the test results. It's about understanding the patient's lived experience of their illness.
Doctors are realizing that listening to a patient's narrative can be really crucial for both diagnosis and treatment.
Interesting.
You know, the way a patient describes their symptoms, their fears, their hopes for recovery can offer valuable insights that you might not get from a medical test alone.
Like that old saying, listen to your patients, they're telling you the diagnosis.
Exactly. And this has led to the development of what's called narrative medicine.
Narrative medicine.
Which emphasizes the importance of storytelling in healthcare.
So can you give us an example of how this works in practice?
Sure. Imagine a patient comes in with chronic fatigue.
Okay.
A doctor focused only on the biological aspects might run blood tests, do physical exams.
Right.
But by listening to the patient's story, the doctor might discover that the fatigue actually started after a major life event.
Okay.
Like a divorce or a death of a loved one.
So that gives them some context.
Right. It can lead to a more holistic approach to treatment.
Yeah.
One that addresses not just the physical symptoms, but also the emotional and psychological factors that might be contributing to the illness.
It's about treating the whole person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not just the disease.
It's amazing how narrative analysis can be applied to so many different fields, from family dynamics to medical practice.
Right.
It's making me rethink how I view storytelling in general.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, really?
There's a whole other world of storytelling that we need to explore.
Lay it on me.
The digital realm.
Oh, yeah.
Social media blogs, online forums.
We are just bombarded with stories these days.
I know, it's a never-ending stream.
It is.
Of narrative.
So how does this online world change the game when it comes to narrative analysis?
Well, one of the most intriguing aspects is this concept of curated identities.
Curated identities?
Yeah, in the digital world, we have much more control over the narratives we present.
Okay.
We choose what stories to share, how to frame them, which aspects of ourselves to highlight.
So we're crafting our own personal brand online.
You got it.
We're carefully choosing the stories that fit the image we want to project.
And that raises all sorts of questions about authenticity.
Yeah.
You know, how much of our online selves are truly reflective of who we are offline?
Are we being genuine, or are we presenting an idealized version of ourselves?
Right.
Like we're performing in a way.
It is.
We're all actors on the digital stage, playing to an audience.
But then it makes you wonder, who is writing the script?
Yeah.
Are we consciously crafting these online personas?
Yeah.
Or are we being subtly influenced by the platforms themselves?
Right.
By these algorithms that decide what we see and who sees us?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's an important one.
It is.
It's really important to be aware of how these platforms might be shaping the narratives that we both consume and create.
Okay. So there's a lot of potential for empowerment, though, as well.
Oh, absolutely.
In this digital age of storytelling.
For sure.
So can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, like think about social movements
Okay.
that have really gained momentum through online platforms.
Okay.
People sharing their stories of injustice.
Right.
You know, connecting with the others who've had similar experiences, and then collectively challenging these dominant narratives.
Like the Me Too movement.
Exactly.
That was a really powerful example.
It was.
Of women, bravely sharing their stories online, breaking the silence, and sparking this global conversation about sexual harassment and assault.
Yeah, and digital narratives can really give a voice to the marginalized and challenge the status quo, even rewrite history.
It's amazing how these digital platforms are changing the way that we share and experience these stories.
It is. It's a really dynamic and constantly evolving landscape.
Yeah.
And narrative discourse analysis helps us make sense of it all.
So by understanding this, we can become more critical consumers of information.
Absolutely.
This has been incredible. We've explored everything from the building blocks of stories to family narratives to the digital frontier of storytelling.
I know, it's been quite a journey.
It really has. But before we wrap up, are there any other key takeaways that we should keep in mind when it comes to narrative discourse analysis?
It's important to remember that narrative analysis, like any field of study, has its limitations.
What are some of those limitations?
Well, one of the biggest challenges, I think, is subjectivity.
Okay.
Narratives are inherently subjective. They're shaped by the storyteller's perspective and their experiences.
Of course.
And our own biases as analysts can also influence how we interpret those narratives.
So there's no such thing as like a completely objective analysis
Exactly.
of a story.
We always bring our own perspectives and assumptions to the table.
So we have to be aware of those biases.
Absolutely.
What other limitations should we be mindful of?
Another one is that narrative analysis tends to focus primarily on stories.
Oh.
But not all communication takes that form.
Right.
So sometimes focusing solely on stories might cause us to overlook other really important forms of discourse.
So we need to be aware of the broader context.
Yeah.
And consider, various ways that people communicate and create meaning.
Exactly.
This has been a really insightful deep dive.
Yeah.
I feel like I've got a new set of lenses to view the world with.
Great.
And a healthy dose of skepticism
Sure.
to help me kind of critically evaluate these stories that I encounter.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
So as we wrap up, I'm left with a question that feels particularly crucial, in this age of information overload.
Yeah.
If our realities are so heavily influenced by the narratives that we consume, who gets to tell the dominant stories?
That is the question, isn't it?
It is a big question.
Whose voices are being amplified? Whose are being silenced?
Yeah.
It's a really important question and one that I think deserves, ongoing exploration and discussion.
Yeah. For sure. So to our listeners, we encourage you to kind of embrace the power of narrative discourse analysis.
Yes.
Decode the stories around you and use your own voices to shape the narratives that matter most.
Absolutely. Everyone has a story to tell.
Yeah.
So listen closely, analyze thoughtfully, and never underestimate the power of a well-told tale.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into narrative discourse analysis.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.